Hey folks, 4RC here. I'm busy wiring up my SCX10. This is a 2012 Jeep Rubicon, and currently looking at the winch. Now I've got a target that I'm trying to get to. This is a real Jeep with a real poison spider bumper, just like the one on the model. And I'm quite impressed by how accurate Axial have got that bumper. It does look really quite similar. However, the winch, I've got a 3Racing Winch here. The winch itself is looking really quite similar to the actual worn winch, apart from the lump at the front here, this thing where the cable comes through called a Fairlead. And also with regards mounting, if you see here in the picture, in the real one, a bit shiny, the winch itself sits pretty much flush onto the bumper. But the problem I've got, and I've seen other people having this problem mounting a 3Racing winch onto the Jeep Rubicon's bumper, is this area here. It goes down slightly and then back up, and I've just dismantled my winch, that's why this is all loose. This piece of metal here that the Fairlead goes onto, it's an integral part of the winch. It's too wide. The width there does not fit in the dip on the bumper, so you have to put spacers underneath to lift it out. That's just not looking right. So what I'm going to be doing with my winch is cutting down this metal bracket and also replacing this Fairlead with, so it's just arrived in the post today. This is from RC Rock Armour over in the States, 1/10 aluminium winch Fairlead, item RRA01FL, and that's it. It gives you a nice aluminium Fairlead, which is exactly the right shape. Right, so I've got the original 3Racing Fairlead off, and it seems to have these kind of tiny metal rivets on the back that actually hold it onto this plate. So all I did to get this off was put this on my vise and then carefully with a centre punch just punch down a bit to loosen that, and then put a screwdriver in between this and the actual bracket and just pop it out on both sides. So that's off, and now here is the RC Rock Armour Fairlead mounted. To fit that, I just lined it up and eyeballed where it needed to go, held it, and then just marked that with a very fine marker pen to work out where the hole needed to be. These are, I think that, yeah, they're M2 2mm Allen bolts. I don't have a tap for that, so I drilled it through with a 1.5mm drill bit, and then worked it out slightly just by hand with a drill bit, just to make that kind of like about 1.7 1.8mm hole, a little bit all by hand that, and then I just drove in with an Allen driver, and the this is an RCScrewz stainless steel 2mm Allen bolt, and it's quite hard compared to this black metal, and it's cut its own thread in, luckily. So that's drilled that in and fixed. Obviously these are too long at the moment, I'll have to cut those off. So the Fairlead's on. Now I need to work out how much of this bracket here to cut off on each side so it fits in the recessed part of the bumper. Right, I just finished waterproofing or water resisting the winch. I wouldn't say it's waterproof. I've dismantled this. If you haven't dismantled one of these before, the motor's there, and there's a little brass gearbox and a metal bearing on this side. It's not a rubber sealed bearing, it's a metal sealed one. So basically bearing out, loads of marine grease on that, marine grease to the gearbox. The motor itself seems to be fairly well sealed up. I did think about plastidipping it. There aren't any vents on the little motor, but the tolerance for that motor fitting in the plastic casting is so tight. I think if you put a layer of Plastidip on it, you wouldn't be able to slide it back in. So it's just got marine grease on the bearing end. Also fitted a longer wire because I need the wire to come all the way through into the model. Right, so I've started trimming down the 3Racing bracket for the winch to make it narrow enough to sit on the poison spider bumper, nice and flat. The way I've worked out how much to chop off with the Fairlead in place, I've basically just lined it up and had a look to see how narrow it needs to be, and then marked that with a scribe. And then the metal's thin enough, if you've got a nice pair of tin snips like this, you literally can just chop it. If you don't have tin snips this big, then you might want to hacksaw it or Dremel it or something like that. But with tin snips, fortunately you can, if I get it accurately lined up, just snip it off. So now we have that bracket narrow enough that it will fit completely flush onto the bumper, and then obviously the winch will sit back on top. I'm going to go off and file all that now before I cut my fingers. Right, here's the 4 holes that I've just drilled through the bumper, and my backing piece of metal now marked out. I just slid that in place underneath the bumper and just spotted where the holes are going to need to be drilled through. That's so the bolts can come through this way and then nuts are going to go on top. Right, I've drilled through the backing up plate now, and that's everything mounted, obviously without the winch. So you've got the 4 nuts and bolts going through there. I decided to countersink some slightly shorter screws just to make it a bit neater there. These are the Axial M3 thin nylon nuts. They just don't stand up quite so high, so then the winch will sit on like that. So around the front it will look like just about like that. Obviously I've got to put the Fairlead back on. So I now need to take this off, fix the winch onto the bracket, and then get the bracket bolted back on. Before I put the winch back on, I thought I'd have a go at rethreading it. I'm going to try out some actual wire here rather than the original black nylon thread. I've actually got some 0.5mm cable, actual stainless steel cable. See how that works out. Hoping it looks a bit more scale. And on the end here is a very small copper, what's called a thimble, and that helps guide the wire round as you're wrapping round on your hook. It helps to just make a nice smooth and strong joint. This is a hook from RC 4-wheel drive. It's the size of it, so make different sizes. This is a King Kong small hook, part number Z-S0507, and I got that from RC Bits in the UK. So there we go, the finished product. I have to say I'm really pleased how this has turned out. So we've got the 3Racing Winch with the RC Rock Armour Fairlead attached there, custom mounting plate underneath the Axial Poison Spider bumper that comes with the SCX10 Jeep Rubicon 2012, and all fitted and working well. The only thing I think I might fiddle with in the future is the actual bumper itself is quite soft plastic, and there's just this run of plastic along the top to screw into. And as you can see, if you put force on it, it does flex. So this bracket here, I might make one that goes along a lot longer each side to spread that weight, that force out. I think if you're winching that's going to flex quite a lot. With a heavy truck, that might not be good, but certainly from a scale looks point of view, I think that's a pretty good result.